Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. Real excited about our guest tonight. I heard about Lori Rehfeldt, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I was told she'd be a great guest. And we finally got it together, and she is our guest tonight. And this is a really interesting story we're going to be hearing tonight. Things have been happening. I've heard about this in the Bentwaters in the area in England, Suffolk, for decades. Weird things have been happening. Anyway, she sort of had a precursor, I would call it, to the incident that happened in December of 1980. Her incident, or the first thing that happened to her, was back in February of the same year. So we're going to be talking to her about that. A couple of things here. The blog this week is part 3, the case of Piero Fortunato Zanfretta. That's the third time I've had to say that. I know Charles did that purposely because he wanted to hear me screw it up. That's the blogger. It's a great blog. Check it out over at podcastufo.com. And anyone, you can support the show over there too. Anyone can do that. You can have like an ad-free podcast if you would like to support on Patreon. And there's a feed that'll go right into your media player. And that's only $2 or more a month if you'd like to do that. So coming up this Friday, we have at 6 p.m. Eastern, we have Eric Mitchell and Heidi Gadd. It's a very interesting conversation. So please check that out. It's right here on YouTube, and it'll go out on the podcast. Next Tuesday, we have Chris Johnson on Roswell. And I know Roswell again. Yes, why not Roswell? There's always interesting things I still think that's an interesting case, and there's still some yet to be discovered, possibly, maybe. I don't know. I believe that everyone that was a witness is gone these days, but it's still a fascinating case, and we're going to be talking about that next week. So I get excited. I have some more exciting news. What I think is exciting, it's exciting for myself and for my producer, Donna, and I. We're going to be meeting Keith Taylor. He's been a guest on the show before from down in Washington, D.C. We're going to be meeting him in Montauk at the end of this month with the Tedesco brothers. So we'll be in I think it's called the Nightcrawler van. We're going to be in that, and I'm going to look at all their detection system and witness it firsthand. And hopefully we'll actually see something. That would be great if that would happen, but we'll see what happens there. So I think I'm going to try to run something from there live, but I don't know. That'll be a Friday night, and we'll just see what happens. But I do want to thank you all for you watching the show, the people that watch live. I do want to say, starting September 2nd, right after Labor Day, I'm going to be switching to the time slot of 9 p.m. Eastern, 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern. I know that may disturb some of you that always watch this live. It may help a lot of other people that watch this live too at that time slot. So that's starting September 2nd, and I already have a great guest lined up for then. So we're going to be switching the Tuesday time slot for then. We still do the Friday at 6 p.m. nice and early, too early for a lot of people. Anyway, I am looking forward to our guests. Yeah. Okay. So we'll take 2. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. So I think years ago I was told about you, and that you had quite a story. And when did you write your book, and when did that come out? This was before the book.
Oh, yeah. I just I've been wanting to write this book since I left England in 1980. So I started writing it in the fall time. I was going through some loss, grieving, and I figured now's the time. I mean, it's like my feelings, everything was in there. So, I really wanted to put my heart, my soul into the book, and it gave me a distraction, a positive distraction. And plus I was able to find a good editor. So that was pretty much the only rule I had to do is you are not writing a book without an editor. So
That's a great idea.
not a ghostwriter, but someone that
Yep.
was going to make sure I put my verbs and my nouns in the right place and
Yeah.
figured out what a semicolon is. Yeah.
The editing they're supposed to do. So so this is very strange. A lot of people are unaware of that other things had happened in that area. And I had someone on my show a number of years ago that was from that area in Suffolk, and he said that things have been going on there for hundreds of years, according to him. He was saying there were cryptids, there were all kinds of other things, not just UFOs, but so very active area. But so if you'd like, let's just start right out and go right where this very first thing happened. And before that, I just want to make sure that I have this right. It wasn't until several years later that you even heard about the incident that happened in December of the same year, right?
Yeah, it was about 16 years later, 1996. I mean, I wasn't watching really any of the sci-fi channels and that kind of thing, and I just kind of put what happened to me, I just buried it. I just didn't want to deal with it and talk. I wanted to just get on with my life. And, but I did pursue it somewhat. I mean, when I got to my next assignment, which was at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado, I ran into a tech sergeant. I think he became Master Sergeant Campo. And he was actually in charge of Charlie Flight, so he worked for John Burroughs. Actually worked for him, and I went up to him and I asked him. I said, "Do you think there was something off about the base?" I was trying to be real subtle because we were both working, and he had this really weird smile on his face, as if he's saying, even if I was going to tell you, I'm not going to tell you anything, because, it was like, he just had that weird smile, like go away. And I realized that, I wasn't going to pursue it. It was just because at the time I was a senior airman at the time. So, as he was already a tech or a master sergeant. So I didn't want to, rock the boat. And but I knew, based on his look, I realized that something. More people knew of what was going on than they let it be. We heard all the stories when we first got there. Oh, there's East End Charlie who walks along the runway and he scares the hell out of the fire department people, and he's just doing all kinds of crazy things. And there's the woman who doesn't have a face and she looks like a mask, and she kind of like a fencing mask, I guess it looks like, and she's on a bicycle and she kind of chases after people, but she can ride that. It's like an old-fashioned bicycle, and she can ride it really fast. Because scared the hell out of some guys, and they told me that they were driving 50 miles an hour on some of those winding back roads, and she kept up with them. So
wow.
So
were there a lot of people witnessing that?
That particular one, it was just kind of odd because I wasn't in the Metro van at that time, but they were using a Metro van that we would just all climb into the back of it and sit on the floor, and they would just drive us to our posts, and then we'd get off at each of us got off at our post. So the only one who had windows to see out of was the driver, who, and he kept looking. And of course he didn't want to say anything to anybody. Like, I'm really freaking out right now because there's this woman without a face that's riding her bicycle beside me and I can't shake her. So,
Wow.
Yeah. So there were lots of things like that. And you did read my book, right?
Sure.
Okay, that's a good answer.
No.
Yeah. So you, like the cryptids and that, they were pretty much in my story of haunting. And so
now wait a minute. I don't know if I think you were joking, But did you send me? You didn't send me your book. A lot of times I do get books in the mail.
No, but I will
Okay.
send it to you because I just
Well, it
ordered.
depends on how this interview goes.
Okay. Okay. Only if you're very good.
Okay. I promise not to insult you too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so when you say your encounter happened in February, is this like a series of things that happened, or is it just one event?
In my case, it was a series of different things happening at different times, and I'd be happy to go through the timeline of
Yeah.
when certain things happened.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I got to the base in May of 1978, and right as soon as I got off the base, I could feel something was off with the atmosphere. It was just, it just felt like a heavy weight was pushing on me. Like, it just didn't feel. It just felt like the gravitational pull was just really odd. And and I had stayed up. I was so anxious about getting to Bentwaters. So of course I didn't sleep on the plane. And so by the time I got to the base, I was kind of cranky. And I finally said, I don't know what this feeling is, but it's probably because I'm exhausted and I need to get some sleep. And so. And as soon as I got off the bus, my sponsors were there, and it was Jackie and John Fraser, husband and wife, decided to be my sponsors. And the first thing she said to me was, "Welcome to Cripple Creek." And I was like, this is not good. Most of the buildings were Quonset huts. I mean, I felt like we went back in time. It was just really, I don't know, just felt like we were in a different time zone, like the 1940s. And and then when we realized that we get to the dormitory, that even television there was only 2 or 3 channels, and they didn't start until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then everything, even the radio, shut down at midnight or 11 o'clock in the evening. So
Wow.
for people used to watching TV until 2 o'clock in the morning, where the American flag shows up, the
Oh yeah.
whatever, the Star Spangled Banner, one of those songs. Yeah, and I just felt like, so entertainment was really, we had a movie theater and we had a bowling alley with 2 lanes. It was like, this is going to be so much fun. We had a bookstore, so we, but after a while, there were only so many books you could read, and it was just kind of it was. I think I want to go back to Milden Hall, where we flew into, and yeah, they even had an ice cream machine. We didn't even have that, so it was really, it was just, anyway. And most people say that it was just the base itself. It was very archaic and antiquated, to the point that, and it was kind of funny, when I was reading Left at East Gate by Larry Warren and Peter Robbins, he noticed they pointed out to him the new bowling alley. Now, this is not the 2 lane that I got to experience. It was a full building with the bowling lanes. And he was like, "Oh my God, this is horrible." And I'm thinking to myself, reading the book, you don't know what it was like 2 years earlier. This is luxury now. But yeah, so, but then there was also, there were a lot of guys that felt something was off.
Now, is this also, I know they called them the sister bases, Bentwaters and Woodbridge, about
Yes.
7 miles apart, I believe, something like that. Were people feeling that type of thing in both areas, or was it concentrated more in one of the base areas?
I think it was both. Most of it was, there was a lot of guys would get just fed up they just couldn't take it anymore. It
Mm.
was they would just get this fight or flight feeling like they had to get out of there.
Wow.
And in some cases, some of them would start, smoking pot, using drugs. Some of them would shoot their weapon off while they were out on at the gate shack. Others, one guy stole an M16 and tried to dismantle it and send it home, but instead he ended up throwing it into the North Sea. Then they had to go collect it. I mean, we had a lot
Is these things that they get discharged for? Dishonorable discharge?
Yeah. Some of them did. Some of them just were processed out. They would use this line saying, well, you weren't doing your job, because they would pull them off of their job, which would be whether it's the security. We had security and law enforcement that was separate. So I was law enforcement. So it was as if they put me in a different job that was unrelated to law enforcement. And they said, well, we didn't do what we said we were going to do in the contract, that you would be doing these functions. And so you can have an honorable discharge to get out. But what they didn't tell you is that, we had a crazy, Major Ziegler he was just railroading people out left and right. And any way he could, he could do that. He had this group of guys that were in security police, and now they would branded, taken their, they took their badge away and took their beret away and said, you're going to be out picking up garbage on the street. And, it was just humiliating stuff like that, which was really uncalled for. But when they got out, in many cases, they put a code on their DD Form 214 that pretty much said if they decide they want to re-enlist, they're barred from re-enlisting. And
wow. Yeah.
And I also felt that pressure during my time there. It didn't really start immediately in regard to feeling like I was under the magnifying glass, that I was being watched. But I did feel like I had to kind of like low crawl my way through the 2 years I was there to get out and to get to my next base. And when I got to my next base, I looked back at Bentwaters and I thought, and Woodbridge, and I thought, it didn't have to be that way. At least I didn't think, the atmosphere, what was happening to a lot of the young airmen. And and I just felt like when I left there, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to miss you guys. It was more like, I'm out of here. I'm so out of here. Yeah. So
it almost sounds like an island in a way, where you want to get off this island and, you're stuck there. That's kind of what it sounds like.
We would actually have, they were selling this sheet in the bookstore on the base that you can count down your days. So I made my own sheet, and I kept it in, and I made little squares, and each day I'd color in each little square. This was probably from September of 1980 until I left in December 15th. My port call the day I was supposed to leave was actually December 26th. And I said, no, I'm going to go on leave. I'm just wanting to go on leave and go home. I wanted to go home for Christmas. And having grown up in New York, we were also dealing with the fact that John Lennon had just died. And, living in New York, and I was going back to New York. So it was just a lot of heavy weight there. But I was counting my days down. I wanted to get out of there. I wanted everything that happened to be behind me. And it would have been nice to have been able to explore a lot of these things going on. Like if I could have explored like what was going on with the atmosphere. I mean,
I know the feeling, but first of all, this person here in chat wanted to know how far. Oh, I think he's got a picture of a wombat up there. But how far is it to the nearest decent town? He was asking from where you were stationed? Like,
It would have
if you
been,
went to town?
it would have been Ipswich, but at that time to get anywhere, uh, if you were an airman, you didn't have a car. I mean, you can stand on the side of the road. Maybe a bus would show up and take you into Ipswich, but most of the time there was a private company that worked at Bentwaters where we would actually take a taxi to go into, go into Ipswich.
I see.
And
Uh-huh.
and the other little towns like Woodbridge was really close by, but Woodbridge was they shut down at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock. I mean, by the time we were off, because we worked crazy hours, we worked swings and mids. Every time we went out into those areas, it was pretty much the town was shut down, and it was always interesting too around Christmas time. When you're in the States, we're all about decorations or deck the halls, and it's always lots of colorful lights and stuff. Over in England, it was just a whole lot more subtle. But the best thing that happened, and I find this amusing, but I have a whacked out sense of humor anyway, so is when Thanksgiving came on. Was my first, it was November of 78. I went into the chow hall, which the food there was horrible. And I mean, it was really, really bad. And all of a sudden I'm noticing it's Thanksgiving, and I'm noticing they have all this really good food. It's like they were hoarding it until Thanksgiving. But that's not the part that I thought was interesting. The part that I thought was interesting is that the British were very kind and they dressed up as pilgrims. And I was thinking, well, let me think how this happened. They were persecuted in England, and they took the ship over to Plymouth, and
Puritans, yes, yeah.
And so these, and here they are, because the British wanted them out, or they were kicking them out for maybe a religious persecution. So yeah, it was kind of ironic that they were celebrating or helping us celebrate Thanksgiving, to be thankful that we left England to get, but most of us were waiting. We had the countdown sheet to wait till we could
There's
leave.
someone here in chat that was saying that their father served as U.S. Air Force Vietnam 8th Flyer Wing, Bentwaters, England. He was a mechanic there. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, but it's a very active base. And I know, there was, when I had Charles Hull on before, I made the mistake of asking him if there were nuclear weapons, if it was true that they were there. And he said he can't, everyone knows that there was, but he got pretty upset that I asked him that question about, the nukes there. And so that, a lot of things happened. I'm sure you looked at everything that happened back in December. But what started happening to you, and you left by December 15th, did you say?
Yeah.
So you were gone just before all that happened. And but what happened that you witnessed?
Well, when I got there in May of 78, it was at the end of May. We had gone into we were doing some tactical exercise, and once the exercise was over, that's where we were wearing the gas masks and doing all this, just playing war and working really, really long hours. And then one day, it was the beginning of a swing shift, and my supervisor told me to stand out near the weapons storage area, but I couldn't go in the weapons storage area because I didn't have the classification, because I was law enforcement, not security. And so I was standing out there on about maybe less than an eighth of a mile. I mean, it was really close to the weapons storage area. And the reason I was there is that they were moving the nuclear bombs from, they had them at both bases, and they were moving the nuclear bombs from Woodbridge to Bentwaters. And they told me pretty much, and I was carrying an M16, and they told me pretty much, if anyone comes over that hill, shoot them. Don't
Oh,
even ask questions, shoot them. And I'm thinking there, of course, now I'm going to this whole philosophical thing. Would I really shoot somebody if they were coming over the hill? Or
yeah.
would
What if
I,
it was a kid or something? You know, I mean,
yeah.
yeah,
Or would I say, wait a second, why can't we be friends?
yeah,
And, but they were, it was, I was really, that was a heavy thing to think about. And I was just hoping that no one would come over the hill, and
God, yes. Hmm.
plus I would have been at the base of the hill, so they would have had a better aim at me. And
Hmm.
but yeah, and then I looked behind me and I saw it was a convoy, and they were moving all the weapons. And the interesting thing is that Ken Kern, who was an airman first class at the time, he told me that he had been working at the Woodbridge security side, and when they moved all the weapons over, they moved over the guys that were working on Woodbridge combined with the guys that were over at Bentwaters, the security guys. So he told me that they had just recently renovated the weapons storage area, which was now the non-nuclear weapons, non-NMSA, non-munition storage, non-nuclear storage area. And it was really kind of strange that they put millions of dollars into this renovation. And that was one place where I had experience. Now, this is several months later. I would work the NMSA over at Woodbridge, and which I didn't mind. And I was working a midnight shift. A lot of things that happened to me happened during the midnight shift, and and we were right up against Rendlesham Forest, and all of a sudden I get to my gate shack. It was really, really cold out, and it was like this icy rain coming down, and all I wanted to do is get all my stuff into the gate shack, and then with my building checklist go out and check all the buildings. When all of a sudden I had this flash in my head of this 7-8 foot tall praying mantis who told me to go back to my gate shack. And I stopped and I pretty much did an about face, and I said, okay, I'm going back. So I went into my gate shack and I figured I'll check all the buildings when it's daybreak. And that was just something that I never talked about ever, because I couldn't figure out why my brain would see a 7-foot praying mantis. It could have been a 7-foot mosquito or something, but no, it was this particular being. And then I was,
let's talk a little bit about it if we can. First of all, had you ever heard of anyone mention, the mantis aliens before? Like, you hear people talk about it every now and then. Had you ever heard that, first of all? Anyone ever say something like that?
Well, back in the day, I didn't hear anything about it. Yeah. Nothing,
I hadn't since I've looked into this topic, yes, but before that, no. The next thing I want to ask you is, was it was standing on 2 feet?
Yes.
And was it wearing something?
Yeah, he was wearing something. It was kind of black, and it looked like almost like a warrior kind of a uniform, like it was just black, like with leather straps or whatnot. And he was pacing, and so I knew that he was important. Someone told me that he was trying to figure something out, and he needed some space from wherever he was. So I my assumption was that he came up from the underneath, inside the whatever's under the ground, and he had to do his thing, checking, and pacing. And so,
and was this verbal? You actually heard like a voice?
No, this was all, it was all telepathic. It was just all, he presented himself in my mind, and he said, "Don't go," you know. So, it's kind of like, when he kind of reminded me of being a high-ranking individual, but, I still, the fact that he was a praying mantis, it was just something I didn't want to have to see. And I think a lot of times these beings know that you're scared, or they know that you know
And
fortunately.
were you
What's that?
scared?
I, I was scared enough to say I'm just gonna stay in my gate shack and listen to my cassette tapes. I had a mixture like Annie, the sun will come up tomorrow,
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. But I just I wasn't going to pursue it. And if I'd seen him, I probably would have been really, really scared. I mean, he would have had to convince me or something that I'm okay. But the I talked to Linda Moulton Howe about a year or so ago, and she had told me that there were mantids at the base. I don't know how she knew, or what. She was being kind of uh, secretive. Like, I can't really say much about it. I'm like, well, whatever, because because I witnessed it. But and the last thing I could do too is tell my supervisor, excuse me, I really don't want to go back into the non-munition storage area, because there's this mantid in there, or he looks a praying mantis. It just, they could have railroaded me out. I mean, that would
I'm
have been a
sure.
good
Yeah.
excuse to. And
Unless other people were seeing, I mean, you talk about people seeing this girl or woman with that looks like she might be wearing a mask or has no face on
yeah,
what sounds like a vintage bicycle riding
yeah.
around really fast. I mean, any of those things you come to your superiors, and that would be kind of tough.
Oh
For
yeah,
the,
yeah, yeah. Well, the first one for me was, it was in the middle of the night again. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was fighting to keep awake. And East Gate at the time was just this little telephone booth size building, and you could actually, back then, you could see the whole runway. Where today, if you were to look to see where it was located, they put a big wall on the other side of the street, on the same side of the street as the runway on Woodbridge. And I was really irritated about that, because it took away the view. But before that, you could see the fog rolling in, and just really see everything. You could see the forest from across the runway. And but I was sitting there trying to keep awake, and when all of a sudden I felt again, I felt this deathly white, kind of grayish white face. And if I'm sitting in the gate shack, he would have been about maybe 3-4 feet tall, maybe, if that tall. And he told me too. He said, "Don't turn around. I don't want you to be scared." And so my first experience was with the gray, and I was really tired. So I'm like, fine, I'm not turning around, because I got to sit out here at East Gate. It's the scariest place around. People that work the gate have cried, have shot their weapons off. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to finish my 8 hours or 9 hours and go home. So that was my first experience. And again, it was telepathic. And
Mhm.
it was the same thing. And I didn't think much of it, but it was, except I couldn't talk about it. And it was just, I just had to kind of move forward. The And the third one was really, really, really bothersome for me. It was on Bentwaters side, and this occurred again. It was a midnight shift, and I was going up to. It was near the Ivy Lodge gate, and which is near the side of Bentwaters where they have that museum. They've got the Bentwaters Museum, and there was a fence between off base and on base, right where I had to go. I had to make a left turn, a right turn toward the LOX, the liquid oxygen fence, and I had to get out of my vehicle because the supervisor sometimes would put notes to make sure you got out of the vehicle and to check the locks instead of just putting the brights on and saying, okay, yeah, looks locked. And so I'd get out, but I would feel this sense of this crazy man who, he had dark black hair, and he was, he had dark black hair, but he looked like a swamp man. It was just like, he looked like he'd been, and for some reason I knew that there was definitely a pond on the other side of the fence. So I, one day, decades later, when Google Earth came, I was curious. I said, I wonder if they're really, because I never could see past all the growth, all the ivy and whatever's growing all over the fence. So I couldn't see through it. But sure enough, there it was. So there are a lot of things that have been corroborated. It's like, oh my God, I mean, and I was talking recently to, I'm trying to think of his name, Holland. Oh, anyway, I was talking, and they had mentioned that there is this swamp kind of monster that's from in that area near Tunstall or near where that castle, Tunstall, I think that's where the castle is. So again, and he said that apparently the whole area at one time had been somewhat underwater, so it was kind of a big bog. And he said that this being was tormenting people. So anytime I went by there, I always had that fight or flight feeling, and I just had to I couldn't look through my driver's side. We drove American cars there, so even though we drove on the left side of the road, and I would feel like his face was pressing up against the window, wanting to antagonize me to look, and I was like, no, I'm not looking. I'm just getting the hell out of here. And I put the truck in reverse and fly out of there. But and that was one time where I would get that fight or flight feeling anytime, like I need to get out of there, because it just felt really dangerous. And then there was, this all happened before February 1980, when I was working on D-Flight, and I was lead patrol with Airman First Class Keith Duffield, and he and I were doing the usual thing, giving the gate guard a break, who was Doc Rhodes, and we got to, it was 3:00 in the morning, and we got to the gate. We were checking the gate every on the hour, so it was 0300 hours. And after I checked the gate, I get back into the truck, and it's February, and February in England, or where we were in England, it stayed dark really long, to like 7 in the morning, from 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the evening. So the nights were long. And so it was so we got done. I put the truck in reverse and parked it over by Eastgate, because now we closed Eastgate at during the midnight shift, because hardly any cars came through. And we're sitting there talking, and we're looking in the direction of the North Sea, and also we see an airplane coming in, and I keep looking over at the runway, wondering, why the lights aren't going on, because we have an aircraft coming in. And, I was thinking, wow, we hardly ever had any aircraft coming in at this hour. But if it was coming from over the North Sea, it was actually coming from Germany, possibly, I'm trying to think, not Grafendier, Simbach. And so I was getting ready to get all the paperwork out to do a customs check. The plane would land, we'd go out there and we'd have to check to make sure there wasn't any contraband and whatnot. And then it got up to the runway, and all of a sudden it stopped. And we're both looking at it thinking, that's not usual. And then it started making these geometric movement, up, down, left, right. And then it burst into 3 pieces and flew over the runway. It went like an arc going down before it went straight up. And after that happened, I looked at Keith and I said to him, here's the radio. You got to call it in, because it flew over military space. And he's looking at me and he said, no, you got to call it in because you're the lead patrol. And then I'm like, yeah, but I'm the lead patrol, so I'm telling you to call it, So finally I realized, I'm like, not happy, because I've been dealing with the fact that there were a lot of guys that did not want me in law enforcement. They didn't, and personally, I didn't want to be in law enforcement anymore. And I was just.
Why is that? Not you, but why did they not want you in law enforcement?
Oh, well, some guys were saying that their wives were upset, which I doubt, that they were working with a woman, a midnight shift, and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And I was told things like I should be barefoot and pregnant, and this is like
nice.
I'm looking at them like, no, I don't think so. I said, first of all, I'm only 18, and I have to go on a date first, and it's a lot of work. So but you could just you got Rehfeldt, you got 2 things against you. One, you're a woman. The other, you're a WAF, WAF, which is Women in the Air Force.
Yeah.
And of course, I correct him and I say, well, they don't use WAF anymore. That's not a good one. It's like I had no idea. But, and the other problem is that I grew up on Long Island. So I had a Long Island accent. It was a lot stronger than it is now. I would talk.
Coffee, drinking coffee in the morning.
Coffee, yes. Yeah, you drink coffee.
All my cousins. Yeah, all my cousins are from there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so half the time they were listening to how I was saying things as opposed to what I was saying. And so anyway, I finally get on the radio. I'm like, police control, this is police 4, be advised. I'm thinking, how am I going to say this? There was an aircraft coming in, and it was this guy, Adam Cohen. He was the desk sergeant at the time. And he said, Rehfeldt, get on the landline. And I'm like, yes, excellent thing to do. So I get on the landline. I get out of the truck and go into Eastgate and get on the landline. And he said, look, just get over to the air tower at Woodbridge and find out what they saw. And I thought, oh, excellent answer. Because I was just hoping, it would be corroborated. And so we went over there to the air tower, only to find out that we woke the guy up. And I was like so upset, because everything back then was analog. We didn't have, there wasn't anything digital or, we didn't have computers and, any kind of entertainment either. So, and so to have a recording of something, it was almost virtually impossible. Where today, I think it would have been possible, and I think they could have contacted maybe the local, if there was an airport nearby, or even Lakenheath, that would have been a possibility, but we didn't know. I mean, we had no idea. So when the guy said, "Oh, it could have been afterburners from a British base nearby," and I'm just thinking to myself, afterburners. There's usually a sonic boom. It makes a
That's right.
noise.
Yeah.
This thing didn't make any noise. This thing made no noise whatsoever. And when I left the air tower, I'm walking out. The air tower was actually, you had to climb up this outside staircase, metal staircase, and then you'd get to the door, and you had to pound on it with your foot to get anybody to hear anything who was going to answer the door. And so when I left, I'm walking back down this metal staircase, and I look over, I'm processing all this. I'm processing, okay, we saw this, and it was, and I'm looking at it thinking, sonic boom. I'm thinking, we just, I wanted to smack the guy. And, it didn't make sense. The whole thing just did not make sense. So I,
Lori, can I interrupt you just for a second? I just wanted to ask you what you saw. First of all, Rodrigo sent me a video. We're going to play that. He's in chat and sent me the video of this image right here in the background. Did it look anything at all like that?
Yeah. Well, I'd say the main circle. It's a really good picture. Was it was like one big piece before it kind of, did this kind of like throbbing thing of bursting into three separate pieces. So that's where, it wasn't like the one piece stayed the same and three pieces came out of it. So, but
I have a, and the same thing happened. Charles Holt saw that thing burst into, 5 lights. And I have a friend that's totally unrelated. He used to be on the Antiques Roadshow, and I was sharing an office with him. And he said, basically his UFO shot up toward the mountains and burst into 5 lights. And then it did a rotation. Like it was like they were communicating. The lights were communicating. I mean, so bizarre.
Yeah.
So bizarre. But
well, that's what I thought when it stopped. When it initially was coming in, it looked like an aircraft. It looked like actually it would have been the size, based on the light, it was about the size of a cargo plane. And when it stopped and did this up, down, left, right, it was as if it was saying, "Oh man, we're being spotted. They see us." It was kind of like, what should we do? It's like, oh, okay, let's just go up, burst in 3 pieces. Let's get out of here. But I, it was really funny because for us, we were just trying to process it. It was, it was just something that we didn't expect, and it felt like it happened rather quickly. And but what happened was when I was leaving the air tower, all of a sudden it was starting to become daylight, and I didn't connect the dots at that time. I did remember looking out and seeing looking out at the sky, but not thinking about, the fact that, it's February, it doesn't get daylight until about 7 in the morning. And we saw the lights at 3 in the morning. So it didn't make sense. So there was,
you had missing time, basically.
Yes. Yeah. We definitely had missing time.
And was it just you and Keith alone? Was there anyone else?
No, it was just us. And but I found out later on, Doc Rhodes, who was on the main gate at Woodbridge, he actually did see the lights from his point of view, and he noticed and he thought, "Wow, what an interesting light show." So, but we never talked about it. I mean, and I don't even know if he was listening to the radio when I had called it in, but it was really interesting that he corroborated that he had seen it from his point of view, which would have been looking in the direction of over base housing, which was in the direction of East Gate. Because Woodbridge is a really small, both bases are pretty small, but Woodbridge was really, really small. It was really tiny.
And you may have mentioned this, but maybe I missed it. Did you hear any sound at all?
Nope, no sound, no
Mm.
sound. Yeah, I think when it stopped and it hovered, but it wasn't making any sound. It definitely, I mean, first I'm looking for the blue lights to pop on so that this aircraft could land, and then, then it didn't, and it was, just it was just baffling. We were both kind of stunned. Like, how do you process that?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
And the other problem that I had is because I had to report it, and this really kind of made me mad, was the fact that I was going to take a lot of heat for it. It was like, oh, Rehfeldt seeing UFOs, and that's the last thing you want. I mean, I felt so marginalized and so beaten down. And, I've been there almost 2 years at that point. And, I just didn't want to stand out in any way.
I
And
bet. Mhm.
that's why when I found out many years later that the UFO came back and it had Colonel Halt seeing it and all these NCOs seeing it, I was sort of like, power to the people, yay, because I was thinking, yeah, now
Oh, yeah.
how did you handle it? I mean, I'm glad you saw it. You've got credibility, and but here's the thing: is that what I saw, and it did affect me throughout my life. So, what I saw, I think I deserve as much as my piece of the puzzle is as important as what happened during those nights in December.
Oh,
And,
absolutely. It's just,
you know,
too bad there was only you and one other person for that one, but it
but
still doesn't matter. It happened. It
yeah,
happened. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it could have been just me. I mean, that would have been even,
Right.
would have
Yeah.
been even worse. So, um,
So I
but
just want to say, pardon me, just 1 second. I just want to say goodbye to everyone over at KGRA Radio, and we'll be back next Tuesday with Chris Johnson, and also this coming Friday with Eric Mitchell and Heidi Gadd at 6 p.m. Eastern. All right. Thank you. So we'll just continue on. And no, this is all fascinating. And since I sort of caused a little break here, why don't we run that clip? And I think what Rodrigo said was that it's, I believe he said it's a depiction of what you may have seen, if I have that right. And so I'm going to play this now.
okay. Oh yeah, I know the guy that did this. Yeah,
February of 1980.
Yeah, that's it. Mystery
I was a crew
88.
controller and working in law enforcement. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was just a clear night. I was on patrol at the time, just kind of, bored. All of a sudden, we see this light approaching. It was coming from the area of the North Sea. We couldn't see the aircraft itself. I mean, it was moving in like a regular aircraft. And we looked over at the runway, waiting for the lights to go on. As it got closer and closer, it just stopped. It didn't make any noise. And it just moves up, down, left, right. The movement was very geometric. It was not a normal movement. It was very definitive. And that's where it split into 3 pieces. Those 3 pieces split off, and it took off and flew across the runway at a phenomenal speed, and then went straight up. And now we're stunned. We're like, what was that?
Anyway, that is really interesting. I want to thank, let me just, let's see, here we go. I don't know why they changed things in this program, but they did, and makes it a little tricky.
Yeah,
Now,
that was a friend of mine, Rodrigo, from Portugal, and he helped me coordinate it because he actually used my voice from the Disclosure Project with Stephen Greer when I had interviewed about the UFO sighting. And What the other thing that's interesting is people will ask me, they'll say, well, how come you're talking about all these other things that happened, but before you didn't? And the reason is that's the only thing I could handle talking about, because at the time I was active reserves. I was a captain in the reserves, and I didn't want to go down the Mantid Road or the Swamp Man or the Gray. I just didn't want to.
I get it. And,
yeah.
I mean, it must have been hard for you to talk about it all. And I have to say this to you. I get a feeling about people, and I feel you're extremely credible. I have,
Thank you.
even though it's such a weird, strange story, I feel you're a very credible person. And, and it must have been hard for you to talk about this stuff the first time you did.
Well, I appreciate that. I found that when it was about 1996, as I was working at the U.S. Department of Education in D.C., when we got Netscape on the computer, and I typed in RAF Bentwaters, and the first thing that popped up was Left Eddie's Gate. And I thought it was like that just rocked my world. I was like, oh my God. That was when I discovered that the UFO had come back. And it was really roughly in the same area, except theirs didn't fly over the base or whatnot. I mean, Steve LaPlume, he had an incident at Eastgate where it flew low and very, very slow over the gate, and he said it looks like the air vent that has the squares in the square and the square that are on the ceiling. And so he, there's so many people that have had different experiences at the base, and he was one of them that said he had that fight or flight feeling, and he got out after only being there for 3-4 months. And and it was just a shame, because there were just a lot of really, really smart young people that were just needed to get out. They couldn't take it.
Right. Here's a question. A lot of people will ask, so why did they want to show themselves to us this way? Of course, you don't really know, but I mean, your opinion. And that is like this, why did this thing burst and go in all the different directions and all that?
Well, I think that whatever's out there can actually, they can experience, people who are intuitive tend to be lightning rods for all this kind of activity. I mean, that's why my story starts out as I'm a little girl, and there's something in the basement or the cellar, and I think that and I was aware of having that I could feel things, and I didn't want to tell people that over there either, because they would see the trees in the forest, and I would be like looking at the whole scene. It was just completely, personality wise, it was just completely different. I follow my gut as opposed to putting all these facts together. And I just think that that these beings must have known that it was that they felt comfortable enough to share with me by those flash points in my head of what was going on. I also think that if it was a lot of other people, when you look at it, what do we normally do if something crashes and it's an alien, it's not from this country? What do? We get ice and we kick them out, or we kill them and dissect them.
Well, unfortunately, I think the killing thing is like a terrible, human nature. But that's, I mean, they were told to shoot him down in the 50s, I think it was. And, so just want to just take a little jag here. So David he was talking about, he's over in that general location.
Wow. Yeah.
We can break it, an orb broke into 3 orbs, which is interesting. But
thank you, David. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I appreciate that.
yeah. I mean, there is unfortunately, Stanton Friedman used to say, why would they come here? We're such a warring society, tribal warring society, which we really are. And I mean,
Well, I have an answer for that.
okay,
It's because we're living on a gem of a planet. We
yes,
have a beautiful, beautiful planet. And I think a lot of these alien beings out there know that we are so violent that we're going to screw it up even more than we already have, and to the point that we will destroy our human race. But it's got nothing to do with us. They don't care about us. They care about what we're doing to this planet.
well,
That's
there's a
my
lot of theories
opinion.
about that. A lot of people will agree with you
Mhm.
on that in particular. And I've said a number of times, I've had, I had a astrophysicist on this show that was visiting NASA scientist who basically says the water cooler talk is, if a civilization can get through the bottleneck of technology without blowing themselves up, then they'll travel the stars. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like that's where we're at. We're at the bottleneck. So I'm going to take a little bit of a jag because I told you that I was going to talk about this. And I'm going to talk about it because it's the truth and I really don't care. I
Mhm.
got in real trouble for saying this back in 2014. And I'm going to say it again because I'm not afraid of saying the truth. And that
Mhm.
is, in 2013, I was at a conference in North Carolina and I met Charles Halt and among other people. And that's when I first met people like Randy Nickerson, Alejandro Rojas, Leslie Kane. I met all
Mhm.
these people there. It was a really fun, really nice
Yeah.
event.
Yeah.
Well, Charles Halt, myself, and some other guy, which I didn't know. I mean, we talked to each other, but I didn't know who he was. It was the three of us. We were downstairs talking, and he started talking about the interrogations and the debriefing after their event. And then he said, and they drugged the soldiers. And then he looked at both of us and he said, and they drugged me too. And I
Oh,
said, what? I said, they drugged you too? You've never talked
no.
about that. He said, well, they did. And so I mentioned that on my show in 2014. And Robert Hastings at the time he and I were friends. He was listening to the show. He called me up while I was doing the show live. I saw his phone number and I didn't answer it. And I talked to him afterwards. He said that I was going to get sued. That was a lie. I brought in Charles Holt. Charles said, I don't remember saying that. And Jace, maybe we'll just live with it that you thought you heard me say it. And I'll live with the fact that that you thought, basically we're going to live with that. But he saying that he didn't say it, but he did say it. He said it
Mhm.
right to my face that he was drugged. And again, I'm just talking about it because I shouldn't be afraid to say something that was said to me and that really happened. I didn't imagine it. He said it to me. But so I guess what I'm getting at is, those people were so interrogated after they had that incident and but nothing, you never reported yours. I'm just wondering if you feel as though if you had, do you think you would have been treated the same way?
Well, I did report it.
Oh, you
I,
did.
I,
Okay.
I did report it to the law enforcement desk, and that's usually where they would log it into the desk blotter, which is looked at by the base commander and wing commander. What happened last night. That's pretty much what it was. But it was it was a formal document. I did not fill out any of the forms because they pretty much let it go. And I think the reason they did was because there wasn't any credibility. I was just a airman first class at the time, and so is Keith Duffield. But I just think that I was so marginalized that they really didn't have to shut me up. And but I think when it was so many uh, airmen who had been out there in the field and they came back in, and a lot of them, what happened to them. And I think that when the lights were out there, like for me, missing time, I think it definitely planted different things in my mind that, I would not have known anything of. Like, for instance, I would have these recurring dreams of being on the road at Bentwaters, and it's raining, and I'm telling people I don't belong here. I'm not in law enforcement anymore. And they pretty much told me to shut up and get on my gate check. So, and then I'm still driving, but now I'm in desert, and all of a sudden I come upon this aqua colored crater filled with water. It was aqua colored water in this crater like pond that was probably about 2 or 3 feet deep, but it was really, really peaceful. Then I get a complimentary magazine, the National Geographic, and in it is the pond, and it was this place called Palo Azul. And it turns out it's not that far from the zone of silence. Now, they were doing a lot of frequency experiments at Bentwaters. And here, this is a frequency free zone that has high UFO activity. And I would never have known any of this. And it was just kind of like, when you feel like you're on the Celestine prophecy of this journey, and you're like, why or how is all of this being dropped into my lap, or why do I know what I shouldn't know? And, just like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters, with his devils, that the mountain.
Right.
And I think with Colonel Halt, I think I would believe that they did, just because drug him with that sodium pentothal to make
That's what I was wondering if he didn't say what it was, but I imagine that might have been what they used. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's what they used with Jim Peniston and the others that had to go through it.
Oh, okay.
But I think that they the way the Office of Special Investigations, and they had this MOD Navy guy show up, and they had all these different people from different places that flew in. I mean, apparently, because so many people had witnessed it, they wanted to contain it. And the best way to contain it was probably to also do that, where they would try and block out some of their thoughts through like putting a screen over a thought. So, like through hypnosis or whatnot.
Yeah. Speaking of that, have you ever thought of taking regression hypnosis to see what happened during that missing time?
Yeah. I've thought about it throughout the years, but someone would have to come up to me and say, "Hey, Lori, I can do this for you."
Where are you located?
I'm in Tucson.
All right.
Arizona.
Wait,
right. Okay.
No. We'll talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would do it. I'd do it. Yeah. You can videotape it too, so we could see what what happened, because I think a whole lot more happened than we all know, and I think that there was some kind of a dimensional shift going on. I don't think these beings are coming from from Jupiter and flying in over to us. I think they're coming to us through dimensions.
Very, very possible. It certainly would answer a lot of things that people are seeing and witnessing. And before, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, because things can fade, things can,
right, or appear in different places, like come out and come back in, and really, it would answer a lot of it would explain a lot of what people are seeing, and possibly also why there's no sonic boom or splash in the waters, or things like that. I mean, all possibilities. I mean, we don't have a clue, basically, but it's still really something to think about. Before I forget, I did want to say to the listeners that I do have John Burroughs coming up on the 29th of this month, the end of this month. So just to let everyone know, so how has this
It pretty much went dormant for about the first 15 years until I found out it came back. But I always knew that something was wrong, what happened there. And I just, I think I just needed to reconcile it. And then when I found out it came back, I had a real need to commiserate with others who witnessed. And
Hmm.
then it was at the point where I was not accepted because my incident did not happen those 4 days of December when I was already gone. And
Right.
I'm thinking, shouldn't we all be working together? Like we all have some really fantastic puzzle pieces. And
Absolutely.
the only way I can learn is from hearing other people's knowledge and expertise. And that gives me some expertise. Like, for instance, the whole thing with the zone of silence, there was something about, I could only look up, if I looked up in the night sky, but I could only see it through my peripheral vision, was this star cluster. And there was something about it that I felt comfort every time I would look at it, like it was a friend. And it turns out it's Pleiades.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking there's some connection between Pleaides and the zone of silence and over at Woodbridge. It turns out Sutton Hoo has it's this huge burial site, but the mounds that are on this property are in the shape of Pleiades, the star cluster. I said, okay, now how is it related to zone of silence? Well, it turns out that these Pleiadians, there was one woman and two men that walk around in the desert, and if you get stuck, they're kind of like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. They want to help you, and then if you ask them where they're from, they look up. Yeah, we live up, but they're kind of Nordic looking, and so it's again these little pieces that there are connections, and by talking about it, you can find out through others that yes, that is true. This is true. This is
I do have to
and
say that. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, the last thing I was just going to say is that proof doesn't have to be finding a physical object and saying for me to say to the UFO, look, you got to park your vehicle here. You came over, I think you still came over from Germany, so I still got to do a manifest check. So then I can tell people, see, look what I found. But then they would take them and kill them. So, but having circumstantial evidence is as much evidence when people are echoing similar concepts and similar words and similar phrases.
Commonalities. Yes.
Commonalities, yes.
Right. So one of the things I noticed early on, and when I started looking into the whole, Rendlesham Forest incident, was that it is, like you mentioned earlier, it's very convoluted. It's very, it's like, this one against that one, and and it's really been frustrating, and then and then it makes you to the point where are you going to question someone that because of the way they're acting, and that type of thing. I'm not going to get into any details because I don't want to offend any certain one of them, but I've always felt like exactly what you said. Wouldn't it be a little bit better if everyone would work together and try to understand what happened? And I know I've had, I also had a conversation with Charles Hulp before,
Mm-hmm.
and he has told me that, he really, really, really wishes that this never happened. He never witnessed it. He said he could go on and have a normal life. And I've had, long conversations with him about when he was building his house and stuff like that. And, he likes to put it away and, maybe revisit when he has to, but he'd rather, like so many people, he'd rather it never was a part of their life. But I'm going to ask you that question. Do you think this is actually a gift in a way, or not?
I think it is a gift. I truly do. I think even being intuitive and being able to feel something and see it through my mind's eye, it's it's a gift, and I think it's important to share. I think we all have it to some level, and I think that I still want answers. I want to understand it more. I have that need to understand, and more than really anything. I'm actually going to be leaving in a couple of days to go to the premiere of Capel Green. So it's very similar to what you were just talking about the powers to be, the different people who, all this infighting or outfighting or whatnot. And it's just a shame that, we can't all work together. And I think that when I met Larry Warren in December 1st of 1980. I was on the gate, and we just talked a little bit, but I didn't want to get too much into the conversation because I kept getting in trouble for having people homestead by my gate. So I pretty much said,
What do you mean homestead? Like hang out too much?
Yeah, exactly. Rehfeldt, are you homesteading again? I'm like, yes, I am.
That's funny.
Here's a question.
Here's a question for you, Lori. Have you ever had any other encounters since that time?
Good question. Right now, I'd have to say I've had more paranormal stuff than UFO stuff over the past several years, and
some people think they're related. I don't know what to think about that. I had a friend that used to think they were all related, and he thought everything was dimensional. The whole shebang.
Oh yeah. Well, I know this gentleman in Florida, and his friend, Mark Wentz and Larry. I'm trying to think of his last name. He talks to a lot of ghosts, and one of them, it turned out, was this guy Kevin Banks, who I knew over in England, who I actually wrote on his obituary page about, I didn't really know you well, but what I did know of you, you were a really nice guy, and blah blah blah. And he was talking to Kevin, and so what do you think of Lori Rehfeldt? And he said something, Kevin Banks, who's dead, he said, she's a space woman, is what he said. And I thought that was really bizarre, because they didn't know me at all from, none of them. They were just wanting to find out more about me. And I told them, and the pieces started to fit together. And so it's been pretty bizarre. But with my mom and my sister passed away, I feel like I've been talking to them in my mind quite a bit. And although I have to do most of the questioning, I can't. I'm not that good at it. The conversation is kind of stilted, but it gives me comfort, though. It gives me comfort to know that my mom and them, they're in a good place.
Right. So I think we're about right at the end here. But I guess I would like to ask you one more question, looking for also if there's any questions in chat. But do you consider the incident known in December of 1980? I used to say that it's one of the top cases. Do you consider that like a major case, or do you think there's other UFO incidents that are more astounding than that one in particular?
I think it's an important case. I think it's important for a lot of other reasons. In fact, I think John Burroughs is probably going to talk a lot about the different experiments that were happening over there off base, but were affecting the people on base. That was opening up a bunch of different vortexes and different things that it was like, oh, we made a mistake. Well, what do we do? How do we fix it? Oh, we'll just shut it down and sweep it under the carpet. That there are things still happening there because of different experiments that it didn't end correctly. And one I'm thinking about is Cobra Mist, but some people are saying it's something to do with Tesla when he was doing I think they called it the Death Star or the Death something or another. And so when you start looking at a lot of the mixed bags of all that activity and the fact that the energy lines, the Lee lines that intersect over Bentwaters and whatnot, it correlates with what's happened. If you were to have a ruler, you can take it to the pyramids and to the Bermuda Triangle, which also intersects with Zone of Silence. I mean, all these places are all kind of, wired together, and a lot of it has to do with frequencies. And, it's a matter of understanding how that works. And for someone like me, I mean, I'm not really interested in getting into the nitty gritty. That would be a good Gary Osborne. It would be a wonderful person to talk to about that, because he was the one who deciphered Jim Peniston's ones and zeros that he found out of the with the Rendlesham Forest.
Right. There's controversy about that. I did ask Jim about that. He had a pretty good answer, because there was a ex-girlfriend that said that she saw the book and it was never in there. I think he said that it was a different book. I don't know. But anyway, here's a question for you. Why has Nick never mentioned this incident that you were in? But not only Nick Pope, it's never been. Nobody's ever really talked about it. It's, they always talk about the event of December of the same year, but nobody has ever talked. You're the only one that's ever really brought it up, and hopefully, the word will get out there, and perhaps some of the people that had their incident later on in the year will, connect with you, and it could be more of a one situation.
Yeah. Well, I do know that quite a few people, do know about the incident, but it is funny that it's taken since '96 to really get my story out there, and I just think a lot of people have these blinders on. Again, I'm not saying that my story is as important. I think they all intersect. They all are like puzzle pieces that if they come together, you get a clearer picture. So I don't understand why people who consider themselves researchers, such as Nick Pope and whatnot, aren't looking at all the evidence that's out there. I truly believe that it's so important to do your due diligence and to vet all the people out there who claim to function in certain jobs, previous jobs, and to find out what they did. Is this the real deal? That kind of thing. And so, when you start looking at 1 + 1 = 3, and, you say, okay, I guess that's pretty close. But the sad thing is that people like Nick Pope have the opportunity to get the word out because they've got the voice box right now. They could do it, but, the fact that he chooses not to, it just, it does a disservice, and I try my best to share my story, and I've been fortunate that slowly but surely my story is getting out, and I'm fine with that. I'm a retired major, and I just had have a good life, had a good life, and
Mhm.
you know,
I'd be
yeah,
happy to also. I'd be happy to talk to Nick about that and see if maybe he will look into it a little more. Your story a little more. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
um,
Well,
it's worth a try.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
had my reserves about Nick for years, but I've come to realize I've actually spent some time with him. Come to realize that he's more positive than negative for the UFO community. He's very well spoken, and
Mhm.
he has some very interesting opinions. I think I think with all the criticism that he may get, that I do think he's a more of a positive influence myself. That's my own personal opinion.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say is where I was disappointed was um, I when I first found out that he worked for MOD, he gave the impression, and I took it as truth, that he worked for MOD during what happened in 1980. And it wasn't until I looked up on Wikipedia, he would have only been 15 years old. And, I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? And it wasn't like, and then he threw it back in my face and said, well, you didn't ask me. You could have asked me. And, I'm thinking, it was just kind of confusing, because I really thought that he was somebody. If you're going to work at MOD and do this kind of work, and you're talking about Rendlesham Forest, the best person at MOD would have been the person that was there on site or there during 1980, not somebody that showed up, 1985, 86 or something like that. Then it's hearsay. Then it's, you just read about it, and so
I understand. You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
but I hold no ill will. But yeah, but when you throw it back into someone's face, it's like okay, well, uh, the truth will always come out. The
That's
truth
right.
will set
Yeah.
us free.
Well, I have to say it's been a surprising pleasure. It's the first time
Thank
we
you.
ever talked, and
Yeah.
I've really, really, really enjoyed it. I think you're very not just credible. You're very genuine. I can just feel it. You're very genuine,
I so
and
appreciate you saying that, because I try my best. I try my best, and my story, it's just one of those things that I will not embellish, because
yeah,
it does a disservice to do anything like that.
yeah. And for the people that embellish, I don't think it's needed. There's enough crazy stuff going on that it doesn't need
Mhm,
embellishing. I mean, just even if part of it is true, it's just beyond belief.
mhm.
But
Yeah.
thank you so much.
You're
Again, it's
very
been a real
welcome.
pleasure. All right, everyone. So we'll
Thank
be
you.
back next week with Chris Johnson Tuesday. And don't forget this Friday, 6 p.m., Eric Mitchell and Heidi Gadd. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.